Camp Chronicles podcast. In today's episode, we asked out on our social media if you guys had any questions, so we thought we'd go through them, and some of them could actually lead into full episodes as well. The first one is, and I think it's a question that a lot of people that are interested in doing camp want to know: when does your camp start hiring for next summer?
I actually was going back through my emails today and I got hired right at the very beginning of October in 2019, so for going in 2020. So honestly, I would say probably around October, November time. Like every camp will be different though, because I know most camps will obviously want to confirm their returners going back first, before they then start applying new people to fill those roles. But I would say October, November time they usually start hiring. But they could be hiring all the way through till like March, April. Like I know my camp's still hiring at the minute. What about yours?
So ours really depends. They kind of send out the return interest, and it's got earlier and earlier each year. I've returned. So originally it was in like October time where they wanted to find out if returners were coming back. But because we seem to be quite a social media based camp now, we have a lot of people like that put in applications. So they kind of want to know around like end of August, the start of September, what the returner ratio is kind of looking like. And then I've known people to get hired from the September time and have interviews with the assistant director. So we do it quite early on, but we also have quite a large returning base of people, so it's difficult to gauge how many new staff there's going to be.
Yeah, and like with agencies as well, I think most agencies kind of open up for the following summer of like the current summer. If that makes does that just make sense? So like if you wanted to apply for 2026 summer, like I know at Americamp, they usually open their like early bird applications in the summer of 2025. So you can apply and kind of get everything done and have your Americamp agency interview, but camps then won't actually start hiring people probably for a few months. So if you're really invested in going to camp and you want to apply that early, you can, but then also don't expect to hear back like instantly from camps, because most camps are still going to be in session in like July, August time, so it might take a little bit of time. Are you still hiring this year for your camp as well, or are your roles fully filled?
Well, I think majority of them are filled, and there's like a few kind of filtering through. What happens usually is in like March time, returners will drop out, or circumstances will change for new people, and then they'll have to kind of fulfill the roles. The majority of staff are already hired by like January time, but that's not to panic, because that's not normal for most camps. Most camps, like peak season is about January, February. What's it like for Camp Echo?
I mean, we've definitely still got quite a few roles to fill. So actually, if anybody is thinking of coming to camp this year and they do want to go to Echo, feel free to get in touch with me. Mostly it's like activity roles that we're still looking for. So we've got like high ropes, outback, nature, so obviously working with animals, equestrian, archery. I think there's a few spots for like woodworking and ceramics. So there's a few sports roles as well. So there's like gymnastics, tennis, spin. So there's quite a lot of roles that we are still hiring for. I know we'll be at a Camp America fair as well at the end of this month. Obviously, if you are with other agencies as well, a lot of hiring, in fact, most hiring is done online. So if anybody is thinking of going, like, feel free to reach out to me if you do kind of match those skills or you have experience in those areas, and I can kind of try and direct you to the right people.
I know you guys are at my agency's hiring fair as well, so if I'm correct, I don't know if Americamp are doing some as well, but the hiring fairs in person are starting up again.
Speaking of hiring fairs as well, though, that is a really good way to get hired just quickly. Like, if anybody is, like, right now concerned that they're not going to get hired for the summer, like, no matter what agency you're with, like, obviously I work with Americamp and we've got 4 hiring fairs in February, and I will be at the one in Manchester, so if anybody is there, feel free to say hi. They're a really good way to get hired because obviously you can go and you can speak to camps directly. So I feel like we've probably kind of covered everything and in more detail for that question. That was a long answer to a short question. The next question we got asked was what the visa application process is like. And when we were kind of discussing some of like the worries that people have going into camp in a previous episode, we did mention like the embassy and a short kind of visa process like description. But really, like the application process I didn't find too stressful, did you?
No, it's not stressful. I think it's just long-winded. The
Yeah.
DS-160 form that you have to fill out online in order
Mhm.
to kind of get your visa appointment, it's just a long process. It's easy and the
Mhm.
questions are pretty straightforward. It just takes a while. So if you are doing it, have about 40 to an hour free
Mhm.
to get it done, and make sure you save the document. Every page that you do, save,
Mhm.
because it does time out after so long.
Yeah, and you don't want to be like sitting there trying to find all your previous address history and you'd like got most of it typed up and then you press next, but it's actually timed out before you get finished. So yeah, make sure you save it every now and then. Other than filling out the DS-160, like it's very straightforward. As soon as that's filled out, you just then have to go onto like the embassy website basically and request the appointment. And the only thing I will say is that they don't release all the appointments at once. So if you go on a book an appointment and you realise that there's nothing there at London or Belfast for you to go to, or whichever country you're in, don't like panic because they kind of like release them in batches. I remember like when I booked my first visa appointment when I had to go to the embassy, I was like, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to make any of those dates. I'm not going to get my visa. And then the next time I went on, there was nothing. And I was thinking, oh, I can't do it. And then when I went on again and just checked back, they'd opened up a whole load of new ones. So it's just a case of checking back sometimes.
As a returner, you can actually post your passport down to the
Mm.
embassy, and it's such an easier way to do it. It's stress free, and you don't have to pay all the money if you're like from where we're from, traveling down there. But I
Mhm.
think when I first done it, it was every other week that they released embassy appointments. But I
Mhm.
think it's probably changed now because it's been quite a few years since we've done it.
Yeah. I see like the videos of like everyone queuing up like outside of like the embassy and stuff. And when I went to get my visa, like I don't think I queued up outside of the embassy. People are like, oh, like I waited outside for like half an hour to an hour, and I was like, eh. Like I don't know if you did, but I didn't even like wait outside. I think I was maybe outside for like 5-10 minutes, then went through the security and then I was inside. But the queues weren't that long.
I waited like an hour outside and it was pouring
Oh.
down with rain. It was horrendous. So everyone was just drenched. It
Oh.
wasn't a great start to the appointment. Oh, my
Yeah.
documents were soaked as well, and obviously you know when ink
Oh.
gets wet,
Yeah.
so it was a nightmare. But
Well,
the actual visa process itself, when you get in there and get in the building, I think it's like you're in like some sort of like movie or film. It's just so weird.
it's like being in the capital in the Hunger Games. That's what I always think it's like.
Well, I've got some exciting news actually. Moving on from visas,
Mm.
I have just booked my flight back out to America.
Woohoo!
And this leads on to a question of what's the best way to get cheap flights. Now, I find the best way to get cheap flights is I always book in the British Airways sale in
Mhm.
January. I always feel like this is the best time to get them, and it knocks like about £100 off the usual prices.
Mhm.
Because I've known people that have had to book them and it's been like £700, and then
Mhm.
I've been fortunate enough to get them in like January, and they've been like £500, which still seems quite a lot, but for a return flight to America, and you consider how long you're there, it's not actually that bad.
Mhm.
The reason why I always book with British Airways is just out of easiness, though, because the flight path is literally Newcastle to London Heathrow, London Heathrow onto JFK. It
Mhm.
really does depend on where you're flying from and where you're flying to. Some flights, you might be in the middle of America and you might need to get like two connecting flights. It
Mhm.
really does just depend. How do you usually book your flights?
I'm the same. British Airways always because it's the easiest to fly Newcastle to Heathrow and then Heathrow onwards. There's not really a direct flight to New York from Newcastle. I think like once in a blue moon, like there's like a period of time. I don't know whether they still do it or they used to do it. But yeah, you basically don't get any. If you're lucky enough to live near like Manchester or London or maybe even Edinburgh, you can probably get direct flights for not too bad. I know like if you fly with like Aer Lingus from Manchester, like they end up so much cheaper compared to flying with other airlines. But also if you do fly direct, it's sometimes going to cost more money. Like the direct flights are usually a little bit more expensive, whereas if you look for flights that maybe have like one or two changes, like On the way back home this year, my boyfriend flew from New York to Frankfurt, I think it was, and then Frankfurt into Newcastle, and that was the cheapest flight for him to get. Sometimes like Amsterdam's quite a big airport as well, so like have a look and maybe flying like, I don't know, wherever you live, like Sheffield to Amsterdam and then Amsterdam to New York or something. But yeah, connecting flights are usually slightly cheaper than direct flights in my own experience.
Definitely. And with what you said about Aer Lingus, I flew from Manchester direct once, and I remember that flight was like £400. I think that was my second summer. It was really good. But the last thing I'd probably touch on about flights, and this is just like personal recommendation, I don't know if Ellen agrees with this, is make sure that you're booking your flight and it's a return flight. When you get to border control, especially if you're a returner. I've recently had trouble because I've been going so many times. This time round I actually got questioned, and I had to explain I work at a summer camp, like I come to visit people, but having that return flight covered my back because they knew that I was going to leave. And I know obviously you can change your flights, but they don't really think about that on the spot when they're questioning you. So just kind of, I always recommend to have that return flight booked just so you could say, like, this is when I'm flying out and flying home.
Yeah, and also to be honest, it's way more expensive to book one-way flights, because if you book like a flight one way, like an international flight one way, let's say from Newcastle to New York, that one flight could cost you like £1,000. So yeah, book like a round trip return or book like a flexi return so you can change your date when you come back if you want to. But yeah.
Well, I'll tell you into a little secret, which isn't much of a secret if you looked at my bank account. Every single time I've went to New York, I've changed my flight, and I've saw
Really?
British Airways, the amount of money I've spent on flights with British Airways, genuinely, I could have shares in them. Like, I've spent hundreds of pounds changing them. And I don't know why it is. It's just because in my first summer, I changed it to come home earlier, then decided I didn't want to come home earlier, so then changed it back to go on the date I originally booked. Then what happened? I can't remember what happened the second time. The third time, I went for a long weekend and changed it to come home earlier because I just wasn't in a good headspace. But then ended up being in a really good headspace by the end of it and wanted to leave back on the normal date, so then had to change it. And honestly, I've spent hundreds of pounds. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
so let's maybe not take advice for summer, and let's not rebook your flights a million times unless you want to spend a fortune.
Yeah, don't be indecisive. That's what we're doing.
Basically. The next question that we had as well is, what SIM card do we use when we go out there? And I feel like the big main one that most people use is probably Mint Mobile. A lot of places will, like, you can buy physical SIMs from a lot of places when you actually land in America, but in my experience the best way to do it is get an eSIM, which basically means you don't have to take your old SIM out of your phone. Obviously, not every phone is going to be eSIM compatible, but most like newer smartphones are. You literally just like go on your settings and you like switch off your current SIM, and then you like scan this QR code on your phone, and this magical new SIM card will appear with an American number on it, which does come in very useful actually. If, for example, you want to order DoorDash when you're traveling, or like things like that, or you know, you use an Uber, if you've got an American number, it makes things like that much easier. But yeah, I think, what did I use? I think my first summer I just used my Vodafone because it had like that package on my contract anyways for me to use it in America. My second summer I used something called Tello, which it was like $25 a month, like rolling contract for unlimited data. And then I think Mint Mobile the year just gone, and again I think they had a deal on, is it like $15 a month or something for like unlimited data? I think they do.
Yeah, so we are literally like the same person. First summer, I just used Vodafone because I had it in my plan. I used Mint Mobile. There is a package deal usually where you get 3 months for like $15 a month. It's unlimited everything. And the good thing about using an eSIM is that when you go on and you're getting a new number and stuff, they'll ask where the location is that you're going to be based to have your SIM. So if you know Camp well, you're in the middle of nowhere, and the service on your normal mobile data is terrible. Like, it's so bad. Whereas if you put in, say, the postcode or zip code of the camp that you are at, it'll bring up like a service plan that works the best in that area, and then that's always like worked perfectly for me, and I've ended up having service all over. I mean, there's the odd spots where it's literally just a dead zone, but it's a dead zone for everyone. But I've used Mint Mobile all the other years as well, and I've never couldn't fault it.
Yeah, they're fine. Like, I mean, your signal's not going to be great when you're at camp, realistically. I would hope no one's sitting here expecting to go to camp and get like full 5G everywhere, because like that is not realistic at all. Like, sometimes I feel like you'll get E at most, or it'll be like LTE or something, whatever, and it's not great. So the other thing you could do is possibly speak to returners and see if they know, because obviously different phone providers will have like different towers that work better in some areas. So like I know my camp, the AT&T towers are like the best, but AT&T sims and like eSIMs cost so much. Oh, actually there's one other company that I have used before. I think they're called like Holafly or something like that. Okay, so this other one that I did use this year, because my phone just totally cut out. Like I could not get any data for the life of me. Like it just did not work at all. Thankfully I was with other people, so like I just relied on them having data, but I was panicking thinking, wait, I'm literally not going to be able to use my phone, and I'm the one that likes to navigate and be like, oh yeah, we'll go here, we'll go here. So me not having data was very stressful. And I actually bought a Holafly just for like a few days package, but it's basically an eSIM, but you only get data with it. So it doesn't give you an American number or anything. It is literally just data. And I mean, again, I know other people have used that at camp, but those are just a few options for you if anybody needs options on eSIMs or SIM cards.
And it's so easy to set up, literally, once you get into the US and you get on some Wi-Fi. Just set it up then, don't panic about getting it set up beforehand. I'd done it last year in Central Park in New York and got it all set up. So, but obviously just make sure that your phone and your data is going to work when you get to the US. You can always connect to the Wi-Fi at the airport, but just make sure for like navigating and like for safety purposes that your phone will work. If not, I would definitely recommend to connect to the Wi-Fi and set up your eSIM while you're at the airport, just to make sure you're covered.
My friend Stephen, who I have mentioned multiple times, the first summer, I think it was it first summer? Yeah, there was first summer, he had no eSIM at all. Like just nothing. And we all travelled for about 2 weeks together, or just over 2 weeks. And then after that, some people flew home. I flew to Orlando and I met like my mum and her partner. And Stephen went on and did like a few little solo travel bits in like DC and stuff like that. He had no eSIM the whole time he was travelling by himself. And like we were all like stressed, thinking, oh my god, like I hope he survives, like I hope he's okay. And he was like, oh yeah, it'll be fine, like I'll just like download an offline map and I'll just like use that. And we were thinking, oh my god, like he's gonna get like found in a ditch somewhere or something, but he survived. So yeah, they're not totally necessary for everyone, but they are recommended, I would say.
Yeah. Talking about travelling, how did you find travelling to camp the first time you ever went?
Yeah, because I think the first time I ever travelled to camp, like, I think I was just more excited because I've been waiting like 2 summers, like I've been waiting 2 years for it to finally happen. So I was like really excited, and I was staying in the city by myself for a few days beforehand. So like the actual like travelling to camp for me was kind of like prolonged, because it was like first I was travelling to New York, then I stayed there for like 2 or 3 nights or something. And then after that I was like, right, now you've got to get to Newark Airport and wait for everyone to arrive. Then I have to get to camp. So it's quite like a prolonged sort of thing for me. But like with regards to like the actual travel, like I loved it. I like flying by myself and traveling by myself. It makes me feel like a strong, independent woman.
Literally exactly the same. I'm not even going to repeat what I was going to say, just because Ellen said the exact same thing. Went to New York, it was prolonged. Then went from New York to Newark Airport, waited for everyone, literally the same. But the good thing about, I think your camp do this as well, is that they provide transport to camp. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
you
so
get
like,
picked up in like coaches and stuff from the
yeah,
airport.
so we do that, and it's so funny because what you'll do is majority of camps that like are around the same area for us in like New York, Pennsylvania, is you'll go down to a certain level in the airport, and you'll see one camp over there, one camp over here, one camp over there, one's next to Duncan, one's next to like a telephone box, and you'll just see all the groups, and then you'll slowly see them like trickle out of the doors and get on the buses. So I think majority of the camps do the same thing now, is provide the transport. I think it's just safer and easier, and less people get lost in the process.
You say that, right? I don't think it was this year just gone, I think it was the year before. Some poor boy got on the bus to our camp and realised when he pulled through the gates that he'd got to the wrong camp. He'd got on the wrong bus, and when they were like reading the register out of everyone's names and his name wasn't on it when they were on the bus, he didn't think to go, that's a bit of a red flag. My name's not on the register. So his poor boy came all the way from Newark Airport to Camp Echo, didn't realise until he got through the gates of Camp Echo that he was actually at the wrong camp, and then had to sit and wait and get in contact with the actual camp he was supposed to go to and get them to basically come and rescue him. But he was welcomed in with open arms for the few hours that he was at Echo.
Well, let's talk about funny stories. Something very similar happened at my camp last year as well.
Oh,
the guy was stood with our camp and then just somehow managed to find himself leave the group, go in with another camp, was stood with another camp. Our bus went off, and then he was just with this, I think it was like a sports camp, and he was just with this sports camp, and then like the assistant director at the time was phoning him and was like, where are you? And he didn't speak great English. So then another person answered and was like, oh, he's with this camp. And he's like, you're with the wrong camp. You meant to be with Tyler Hill. The bus has already left. So now I think about it, it seems to be a regular occurrence. So next year maybe we should all both go to the airport with big signs.
I think honestly, like, that's what I need to do. I just, if that is you and you're scared about that happening, just make sure when you're speaking to the people that you get on the bus with, that you make sure you're actually going to the right camp. I mean, I was going to say it's an easy mistake. It's not that much of an easy mistake to make, but I guess sometimes all the travel, you're tired and stressed and things like that, so I can see why it happened. But yeah, always double check. If you want to make sure it's like smooth and quick sailing getting a camp, just make sure you go to the right camp. And the second part of that question was about how long it kind of took us to settle in at camp as well. Were you like settled in straight away, or were you a bit uneasy at first?
Do you know what it is? When I first went, it was probably the easiest I ever settled, apart from the summer just gone. I always recommend trying to get out there a few days earlier to get over the jet lag, or at least get over the majority of the jet lag, because it's a lot being so tired and exhausted, getting to camp, being in a completely new environment with loads of new people.
Do you know, the only bit that it wasn't necessarily unsettling for me. It just depends like what arrival group you're in at camp. So for example, like the cabin counsellors, like the general counsellors, are the last group of arrivals at my camp, and I would say probably most camps. The lifeguards go out and the high ropes go out like 2 weeks early, because they've got full training to do before they can even be trained on the whole like general counsellor side of things. Activity staff all go out early to set up the areas, start making session plans. So when you come in as cabin staff, you're probably going to be like the last group of people arriving, and that was a little bit unsettling, because I was like walking around and I was thinking everybody already knows each other, and like I think there was maybe only like 30, 35, well, there must have been more than that, maybe like 40 of us. It was like kind of like a half and half American and international split my first summer, so all the international cabin arrived on one day and the Americans arrived the day after. That's the only thing that I found to be a bit unsettling. As long as you kind of like, you obviously you'll make friends like even waiting at the airport and on the bus with like the people that are in your like cabin group, then you'll be put into your bunks where you'll probably have activity counsellors in your bunk. Get to know those activity counsellors in your bunk, and then they'll help you to get to know all the other activity or like lifeguard specialist counsellors as well. So that's the only thing that I was a bit like about, but it was pretty easy to slide in with everyone.
It's funny though, isn't it? Because you turn up as an activity specialist, or like for us it's like the lifeguard and waterfront people. You turn up first. Within 2 days, that's when the general counsellors come. But already waterfront or the lifeguard people are the ones that are like walking round the general counsellors, because they already know the place so well after only being there for 2 days. You know, as a returning counsellor, obviously every year not everybody's going to come back. So one of the really good questions here is, how have you found returning without having like some of your friends come back? How have you found that?
I'd say second summer I struggled a lot more. Well, not struggled necessarily. Well, yeah, we'll say struggled. Struggled a lot more because like the people that I travelled with afterwards that I was closest with, like were there was only like me and Stephen that came back. And it's not to say that I wasn't close or friendly with other people, because I absolutely was. But they were already like much closer together, so I was kind of like just weaseling my way back in with them. And like also not circumstances change, but like if you think you might have been in lower camp like your first summer, for example, and all your friends are stay in lower camp, you might get moved up to like an upper camp grade, and then you don't really see those people that you were with as much anyways. So sometimes it like is hard, but it made me branch out a bit more, I guess. And then like this year just gone, I was kind of just like, all right, okay, 90% of the people that I started camp with didn't come back. But then yeah, it's nice because it's like it gives you a chance to get to know everyone else still.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar. So like my second summer as a returner, I'd say 95% of my friends returned. We had a huge returning rate. And then like my third summer, so the summer just gone, I'd say 95% of them didn't return. So it was a big shock to the system. But what I did find is that in my third summer, I got back parts of me that I didn't necessarily bring out as much in my second summer that I had in my first summer. So third summer, I found that I was like more carefree again and just danced and jumped and went crazy. And don't get me wrong, I did that my second summer, but I didn't put myself out there as much second summer because I knew majority of the people, and I didn't. It's not that I didn't feel the need to go out and make friends. It was just that I already knew that I had such special connections. And don't get me wrong, I made great friends in the second summer, that weren't there my first summer. But third summer, like I said, 95% of them didn't return, and I missed them, and I definitely felt their presence wasn't there. But I branched out and I made friends with everyone, and at meal times I went and sat with people that I'd never spoken to before, and I really felt like I was just this crazy version of myself again that I'd maybe not brought out as much second summer.
Yeah. I feel like, kind of like, just to summarize that whole question, it's like a sad thing when people don't come back, because obviously you do miss them, but then also it's nice on the other side of it that you're getting so many new staff in. Like, we've got quite a small returner rate, I would say, this year in comparison to the past few summers, like from 2022 till now. Like this summer there's not as many returners at all, it's kind of got less and less, which again, it's like really sad because like a lot of the people that I'm like close with or have been close with aren't coming back, but also it's like really nice because that'll give us a chance to like get to know and meet so many new people. So yeah, it's like sad, but it's like bittersweet, isn't it? I would say.
Definitely. That's a
Yeah.
perfect way to put it, actually. Yeah, it's
Bittersweet.
yeah.
And then the next question that we had kind of about returning was what it's like going back as a returner for like staff training and orientation. For me, it was like completely different because first summer, obviously, I was the last group of arrivals and all of orientation was brand new. Whereas my second summer, I arrived like 2 days after like the lifeguards and stuff as a lead, and myself and like the rest of the leads were also helping to deliver some of those sessions that I was literally just on the receiving end of the year before. And again, the same this year, like this year just gone, sorry, I was coming back, and rather than sitting there listening to every session, I was on the delivering side of some of them, so it was like totally different. But although I know you mentioned that when we talked about this in the returning episode, which by the way, if anybody is returning to camp, feel free to go back. I'm not sure, was it episode like 3 or 4, I think was our returning
It was one of
episode?
the early ones.
Yeah, go back and listen to that if you're coming back, because we're going at everything in a whole lot more detail. But you said that you were a bit iffy with orientation, like you got a bit bored, didn't you? The
Oh
second
yeah, for
summer.
sure. So first summer, loved it. It was great. It was crazy. It was wild. It was so much fun. I had no idea what was going on. Every day was a new day. Went back second summer, it was like Groundhog Day. Third summer, so the summer just gone, although it was pretty much all the same stuff that I'd done the past 2 years, because I just put myself out there and was like, if I sit around and mope around and I'm like, this is miserable, I've already done this before, then I'm not going to enjoy myself. So I just kind of put myself into a mindset like, I've never done this before, so throw myself into it. And I did that, and I loved it. So even though I've done the same thing over the 3 years, I loved it the third time round.
I think when like going back as a lead, we basically were there earlier, so we would talk through everything before all the cabin staff had got there, whilst like activity staff were doing all their training, and then we'd like re-go through everything again. So I kind of like do orientation like twice in one go, if that makes sense. So like it is a lot of like the same stuff, but the way I would suggest looking at it, especially if you are going back as a returner, there's a high chance that either you're not going to be going back to look after the same kids, you might not be going back into exactly the same role, or you might be going back to be with the same kids, but they're going to have moved up in age division and there'll be like different things and challenges for you to contend with. So don't kind of go into it as with like a, oh, I've heard it all before sort of attitude. Like go into it with more of like a, okay, I've got like a base knowledge, but now I'm going to like listen extra for any like little bits that I don't remember, or like speak more to like counsellors that have maybe had that age group that you're now going to have, and see if there's anything that you can learn from them, rather than just thinking like, oh, it's orientation, I've done it before, I know it already. Like just kind of go into it with a bit more of an open mind, I guess.
That's definitely advice I wish like my second summer I'd given myself, or somebody had given me, for sure. Moving on to kind of a little bit of like camp stories. Do you have like a worst and a funny camp experience?
Yeah, when I saw this question, I was like, okay, I'm thinking back on what 21 weeks worth of campers that I've had like at camp, and I'm like, what actually stands out as being the worst? And I don't honestly feel like I've had any horrific experiences, or I'm gonna have to start documenting every single little thing that happens at camp, because like what I'm living in the moment, and then once it's happened like a week later, so many other things have happened that I've like forgotten. But there's a few that stand out. So obviously with me having the older kids, we do go on trips, which I mentioned in the last episode. I absolutely love going on the trips. They are unbelievable, amazing, but they are hard work, and extra things kind of do come alongside being on trips. So 10th grade go to Orlando. So I've done 2 Orlando trips, and then the 11th graders do a West Coast trip. So I've done a West Coast trip, and every single trip that I've been on, there has been sick kids. So the first trip, they've ended up at urgent care, which is basically like what they call A&E, with this poor boy who thought he had an ear infection, and it was basically like, someone's going to have to take him, and it needs to be someone that's over 21. And like I was going back to Orlando at the end of my post-camp travels, so I was like, do you know what, like I don't want to like take a day away from anyone else like who's not going to be going back, like staff wise. I was like, I'll take him. So I sat in urgent care whilst I could have been in Magic Kingdom for a while, and me and Adam, bless him, sat and watched like SpongeBob and stuff in the waiting area for ages. And then the second summer, myself and Scott, who was the other 10th grade lead, we were like in charge of that whole trip, and I had 2 kids that needed to go to urgent care, so I took those 2 kids to urgent care, both of which I don't actually think they ended up having the sickness that they thought they had. And then I also had another girl who woke up in the morning, again when we were meant to go to Magic Kingdom, and decided she was ill, like she couldn't go. And I was like, right, I again don't want to like take it away from anyone else being there, so I stayed back, because obviously I can't leave her in the hotel by herself. Within a matter of hours, she had perked up and she was absolutely fine, so we spent the rest of the day sunbathing by the pool. So like worst, but also had its funny times. And then this year, the boys, there must have been some bug going around with the boys. They all got sick, so we're on the flight on the way to LA, and I'm like asleep, and then I kind of like wake up, and I'm just like looking around. I turn around behind me, when near the back of the plane, this poor boy was stood in the middle of the aisle, like between the toilet, vomiting all over the floor of the plane. And I was like, oh my god, that's one of my kids. All the other like boy counselors, they were all asleep, so I was like, ah. So I got up and I go and I'm like rubbing his back. I'm like, it's okay, it's just Ellen. I was like, are you alright? He was not alright. He hadn't made it to the toilet. And then that was just the beginning of the end, really, because then it started spreading around everywhere, all the other boys. And multiple of the boys had to like miss the day at Universal. They stayed back at the hotel. We're on Santa Monica. No, we're in UCLA. One of them was, that same boy that had been sick on the plane was sick outside of like a Walgreens or something again. That Tom, bless him, took them back to the hotel. We were waiting outside of Santa Monica to get on the coach back to the hotel. Another boy's like, oh my God, I feel really sick. His face literally went green. And I was like, quick, come over here to try and get him out of the way so he wasn't being sick in front of everyone. Couldn't keep it in. Was sick everywhere. So that's really long-winded, but yeah, I absolutely love going on the trips. But every single trip I've been on, I've dealt with sick kids.
Well, do you have
That's
do you
my
have a
worst.
funny experience?
Funny experience. Funny experience is Avery. Shout out to Avery because she probably provided the most laughs I've ever had at camp ever, just because she's crazy. Was on the high ropes and she was going across, like, you know, the ladder things where they're like attached by ropes and then it's like the ladders and they're separated. She, for the life of her, could not get across those ladders and she like got stuck on one of them. She's literally like hanging over it, like sitting down, like literally one leg over the top, like couldn't get back up. And then she ended up like basically nearly having to get rescued on it. Like they nearly had to do a full rescue, but she was like laughing the whole time. We were all like crying, laughing, watching her. So yeah, shout out Avery for providing many a laughs. But few of them I probably can't mention for the sake of her getting in trouble.
That's so
That was a
funny.
good
Well,
one.
my worst and funny experience, I'm going to
Mhm.
link them together, and it was the first thing
Mhm.
that came to my mind. So, as I expressed on the last video,
Mhm.
I do not enjoy water parks. Don't like them, but we've had to go to one every single year so far. Well, first summer, everybody was in their cute bathing suit, really nice. I didn't have a cute bathing suit, kind of felt left out. So I said to Sam, who was my JC at the time, "Oh, Sam, like, can I borrow one of your bathing suits?" So she was like, "Yeah, like, of course, pick one out." So I picked one out. This was really pretty. Now, for some reason, I was going to a water park and I picked a bathing suit that didn't have straps.
Oh, I can see where this is going, maybe.
We hired this whole water park out. May I add, this was the water park that I went back to last year. And I've got the same girls, just to let you know. So, first summer, I'm like, I hate water parks, hate water slides, hate being submerged into water. Girls are begging me to go on water slides. So I'm like, right, I'm just going to do it. So I go on the first water slide. I'm hating every second of it. I'm like this, as you're told to.
Yeah.
Get plunged out of the water slide. The pressure goes so hard, pulls my swimsuit top down, right? Luckily nobody saw, but when I like jumped out of the water because I panicked, I had to literally like pull my swimsuit
Scramble.
up. Never to this day have I ever lived that story down. What didn't help was returning back to the water park last summer with the same girls, and it's all they talked about. And they were all like, "Hee, that's the water slide that you went on, and like your swimsuit came down." And I'm just like, that is my worst experience, but possibly one of the funniest experiences now when I look back on it.
I can imagine that being pretty traumatizing, and it just solidifies the reason that you don't like water parks and rides and things like that.
And yeah, you might want to wear a cute bathing suit, but make sure it works well with the environment that you're going in.
Yeah, definitely make sure it's got straps and things like that, because otherwise, straight down.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that is bad, to be fair. I guess worst, but also very funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. The next question we had as well, which we both were sitting debriefing before we filmed this, and we're like, this is a really hard question to answer. And it is, what is like our best or most favourite memory from camp? And it's genuinely like really, really hard to like pinpoint one, like, isn't it?
I couldn't give you one because I'm going to say one, but I can tell you now that it's not my most favourite one. And
Yeah.
it's possibly not the best one, and every day the answer would change. But at the same time, they all kind of merge into one memory. And then once you start talking about one, then you flow into another one and another one. But it's definitely, probably is the hardest question that I've ever been asked.
Yeah, there's like so many just like insane things that happen, and it depends what sort of memory you want, because like I could easily say like, oh, going on the trips, but then it's like, right, well, which trip and why is that one better than the others? Or I could say like Olympics, but they'll be like, well, which Olympics, like why that one? Like it's just too hard, really. The one thing that I did note down, which isn't necessarily a memory, but I guess it was like a feeling, it was like an emotion, was going back. Obviously, my second summer was like my girls that I'd had my first summer, I didn't have them again. And it was like knowing that they were like not totally sad and upset, but like some of them were kind of like a little bit gutted that they didn't have me again. And then going back last year I had the same girls that I did my second summer, and again it was like knowing that when I went back they were actually like, for the most part, I think they were happy and like excited to have me back as their counselor, because I was like, okay, that's like sweet, it's like nice. And like even now, like I'll message some of them and it's like so nice that they're like excited to tell me that they're like coming back as a JC, because like I'm excited to have them back there like this year as JCs. Like I think it's amazing that so many of them are coming back, and it's also so nice to know that they're like excited to be like, oh my god, I just signed my contract and stuff like that. So yeah, it's not really like a memory, it's more of just like a little wholesome emotion.
No, it is so special, and it's just seeing their faces on opening day, isn't it? And when
Mhm.
they see you, I think mine was possibly the one that I'm gonna say is the last night of camp, when what we do is the girls pickle, it's called, and we push all the beds
Mhm.
together. So like they're all
The
like
one
next to
big
each other.
super
It's
mega
one big
bed.
bed. And
Mhm.
I do it every year for them, and they always ask me to do it, and I mean I'm on doing it for ages. But it was about like 1 o'clock in the morning. I was nearly falling asleep. I think at one point I did actually fall asleep, and they were all sat round me all together, and they were all just like gossiping and laughing, and like we were talking about like the summer and like the whole experience, and like talking about coming back next year. And
Mhm.
it was just so nice. It was like all my little sisters all sat together. Like it was just
Yeah.
such a, like you said, such a lovely feeling, and it's like
Yeah.
something I'll never forget.
I know. It's like sad, isn't it? Thinking like, realistically, I know in my head I'm not going to be able to go back every single year for the rest of my life. But at the same time, I'm like, it's so sad that like I'll just have to watch them all like grow up through like Instagram and stuff like that. And I was going to say TikTok, but maybe not TikTok if it gets banned in
Let's hope
America.
not.
Let's pray not. And then the last kind of question that we had that was regarding like the during camp experience was, does bullying ever happen between counsellors? And from my own experience, I no, it doesn't happen. I don't know about you, Summer.
No, same. I think it's such a broad question because we can only answer for our two camps, and
Hmm.
I'm sure in the world that we live in, someone else has probably had a different experience.
Hmm.
But as far as I'm aware, it's never happened at my camp. I mean, the odd,
Yeah.
like on your days off, and everyone does what they do and night off and stuff, and being with each other 24/7, like things happen,
Hmm.
arguments may happen, but to be honest, in the environment that you're in and the people that you're surrounded by, it's
Hmm.
kind of a heat of the moment blip, and then you'll apologise
Yeah.
to each other straight afterwards. But no,
Hmm.
bullying doesn't happen, and I think I can speak for my camp in saying that the second something was brought up, and if it did happen, it
Hmm.
would be cut out straight away. The situation would need to be resolved, and if not,
Hmm.
like the party who was maybe doing the bullying would be gone and you wouldn't see them again. They're very strict on it because if you think about it, the campers watch what you do,
Yeah.
and if the campers see that behaviour, then the
From
campers are
everywhere.
gonna copy
Yeah.
type of thing. So
Yeah.
no, I've never seen it at my camp.
I think something we talk about a lot during orientation regarding the kids is that bullying is like repetitive and it's targeted and it's like directed. And a lot of the times, like I do feel like the term bullying gets thrown around a lot. Sometimes people can say things that maybe aren't particularly nice. But again, like you were saying, like if there is like an incident or something happens, like it'll usually get flagged up and it has to be resolved. So almost like does could never get to the point where it could become like repetitive bullying.
So kind of going past all of camp, like conversations and stuff, obviously a big part of your summer experience in America is the traveling afterwards. So one of the questions we got asked was, what was our favourite place to travel? Now I'd probably just give you a story and say all of the places I've been have been my favourite, apart from New Orleans. I found that very dangerous. But I think the one that stands out the most at the moment was probably Nashville, because it was the place I always dreamed of going. I
Mhm.
love country music. It's the only type of music I listen to. So I really felt like at home there.
Yeah. I think most people, if not every single person that'll have been to Nashville, they'll say like Nashville's one of the favourite places they've been. Like I keep telling me mom, like you need to book a flight and go to Nashville at some point because it's just like so much fun. Like anybody that enjoys listening to like live music and it's like going to bars, you don't even need to be like drunk going to bars. Like I think I was sober most nights in Nashville, or relatively, and I still like had a great time. And they've also got a Raising Cane's right on Broadway, so when you finish your night off, you can go for a late night Raising Cane's munchies, and so good. But yeah, like someone was saying, like every single place you end up going, you've got a story, and it's your favorite for some reason. So we'll definitely make a full episode, I think, about it. But yeah, my top three, I would say, are Nashville, Orlando, and Yosemite. They're my top three
I
travel
love that.
places.
And I am copying potentially off Ellen's road trip from last year because she had such a good travel and experience that I think I'm going to possibly steal her road trip plan. So
Honestly,
holla at
do it.
Ellen for your road trip plans.
I'll post a TikTok at some point. In fact, I have actually got a TikTok in my draft about my full like travel itinerary from last summer, so I'll post that for people to see soon.
Love that.
And then the very, very last question that we got asked, which again is a question that is very hard to answer because it's very specific to every single person, is what is a realistic post-camp travel budget? It's very broad and open, isn't it?
It's a hard one because I don't always like answering questions like this because I think it stresses people. I think money is such a big stress factor in things. I've went with very little money before, but I've also done summers with a lot of money because I've saved so well. But like my first summer, I was 18, turning 19, and I didn't have a great job, so it was difficult to save up. And I think I went with about £1,500. Still done a lot, still got to experience a lot, but that was because I got paid from camp as well.
Yeah.
But then I've also been fortunate enough to go with a budget of 5,000. But there's nothing to say that my experiences on that low budget weren't as good as having more money.
Yeah.
It was just the fact that when I had more money, I was open to do more things and maybe go a little bit more high end in places that I was staying.
Yeah. Again, I think when we kind of like film an episode about travel tips and stuff, we can go a lot more into like making the most of your budget and things like that. But for the most part, like I would say if you're doing like, if you can budget at least about like $50 a day for however long. So like if you do the full 30 days, that's $50 a day. That's $1,500. That would be like the bare minimum I would suggest if you were also traveling in a group. If you're doing it by yourself, and sometimes hostels honestly end up being more expensive than hotels in America. If you're doing it by yourself, like I would definitely say you need to budget a little bit more, but like bare minimum $50 a day for the 30 days travel is 1,500 if you want to do it well, basically.
Definitely. And just, it's always good to have a little bit extra funding just in your back pocket, just in case anything was to happen and, you know, you had to get the flight home, or if you're like me and you needed to change your flight for the millionth time. It's always good to have a little bit of money in your back pocket, isn't it?
Yeah.
But we're
Yeah,
planning
definitely.
on doing a big travel video, which well, I'd imagine will have to be in about 4 different parts.
Yeah, I feel like I've got so much, and like between like the two of us traveling to a lot of the same places but probably having different experiences, but also different places, we're probably going to have like a million stories we can tell and tips that we can give and like recommendations of places to stay even for those places. So stay tuned for those. But next week's episode, so we will be having another guest appear on, and this time it is a boy, because when I was looking at the stats actually for this podcast, I think like 70 or 80%, if not more, of like the listeners are girls, and I feel like we do probably cater slightly more towards like the female audience, so it'll be nice to get like a male's perspective and like their take on camp and just see if it's any different to ours, really. But yeah, that I think is everything for this episode. If anybody ever does have any other questions in the future, feel free to just like message either of us on TikTok, or message like the Camp Chronicles account, and we will try our very best to answer the questions as best we can, and we will see you in next week's episode.